Well, I wasn't sure what the timer was going to do, so that's what happened.
It's fine. We sort of got our music. You almost did the magic, Johnny.
That was an amazing musical intro. I don't think I've heard that recently.
Right. I think we've only had it for 2 episodes. No. Okay. So a couple episodes, we had some other Red Hat folks come on to talk about. This was the Project Hummingbird episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And apparently they had one of the, I think his name is Benjamin. Ben. I'm so bad at names. I really need to not be bad at names. It's Ben. He is a musician, obviously not for his day job because he works with us, but he is a musician. And so for some other show that they were doing on the Red Hat YouTubes, he created that intro with the graphics and everything. And apparently then it was like a single use idea. And I was like, I love it. I don't have a modernized intro. The intro for this show still has like the original people who started the show. Folks who've been longtime viewers know that I inherited it around episode 30. And so I was like, this is mine now. If you don't have any objections, it's mine forever. And they were like, yeah, have it forever. That's awesome. Enjoy. And so that was a lovely gift we got. Best gift to us from any guest ever. Also, only gift to us from any guest ever. So there you go.
No pressure, Luke. No pressure.
No pressure, Luke. Anyway, so for today's episode, we do have our guest, Luke Phillips. Before we get into that right quick, just brief announcements. As we've already mentioned, Johnny and I are going to be at KubeCon EU at the end of March. That makes our streaming schedule a little bit weird. So we were actually going to stream 3 weeks in a row, but unfortunately last week our guest needed to cancel due to a medical situation. So everything's okay. It was minor, but it was annoying. I understand. So we're going to just, we're going to reschedule that stream. And then we have Luke today. We will have Natan Yellen with Holmes GPT back tomorrow, or not tomorrow, next week as promised. And then we're still figuring out if we're streaming on the 5th or the 12th of March ahead of KubeCon. And then we will be out for KubeCon for a few weeks and back in April. So that's the streaming schedule. As always, I keep the public calendar updated, even if I don't post an announcement on social media, because I suck at social media. So that's that. Other announcements, very minor announcement, is the AI Ops book I've been talking about throughout this year that I signed myself up for last summer. Is all of the first drafts have been submitted. We're trying to have it actually released and available come KubeCon. And if you've been following me on LinkedIn, you'll see that I was very, very excited to finally be done with my last chapter, which came in at a staggering 62 pages. Don't worry, the editor already figured out how to trim it down to a reasonable number. So it's much better now. And 62 pages is a very long chapter for a tech book. So I'm really thankful to our editors and my publisher at Pact for that. They're very, very great. So yeah, today's stream is CDEvents. I'm just steamrolling here. Johnny, you didn't have anything, did you?
No, it's fine. It's fine. Okay. But no, I didn't have
anything. Today's stream is about CDEvents. CDEvents is a standard is not the word I'm looking for. It's a standard. And here to specification. Thank you. The other S word. CDEvents is a specification. And here to tell us all about CDEvents and a little bit about himself is Luke Phillips. Luke, it's over to you.
Hello. Thank you. You need like a cloud clapping music to go with that. And welcome to our guest. It's a great privilege to get to be here on GitOps Guide to the Galaxy. It's such the 101 episode, I was kind of hoping to get 100, but it's great that you've made it this far. This is excellent opportunity. Speaking of, like, you're talking about like gifts to the podcast. You were kind of gifted the podcast itself from Christian Hernandez, the creation of it.
That's true.
I will be at KubeCon as well. Looking forward to seeing everyone out there. And I'm speaking with Christian. That's why I bring it up. And
did you become his new conference speaking buddy? He stopped adding me. I was really offended that he stopped asking me to be his conference speaking buddy, and I would be more mad at him if he still wasn't one of my longest running friends.
Well, we'll have to bring that up when we get there. This could be
Yeah.
controversial. And we could start some KubeCon drama here of sorts. But no, this is actually my first time ever getting to present with him, so I'm excited. Likewise, we've been friends in the open source community for a while, working on a lot of Argo things. So like some of my own background, you will find me in a lot of ArgoCon talks, kind of a Argo super user. I've made a few small commits, things here and there. I wouldn't call myself a maintainer of it, but like talking about it. Have really enjoyed using the tool, as well as like GitOps and just kind of the whole ecosystem around that. I work today as a principal engineer at a large financial services company. I can't really tell you who they are, but everyone uses them. And beyond that, a long storied career of working in media companies before this, and then a whole bunch of telecom companies before that as well. So that's kind of giving away a little bit of what Christian and I are going to talk about now that Christian has kind of moved on to networking. And I have a lot of like telecom background as well. So our talk will be a little bit of, some of our Argo experiences, but with a networking mindset to it.
I'm actually really looking forward to that because, it is one of those things with networking. I always tell people networking is my worst subject because I used to know a lot about it. I know nothing about it anymore. It's one of those things where your network, like that being correct is so it's so critical and so at so many different levels of like getting it in like so that you have all your permissions and your routing and everything correct is one thing, but also your overall network health adds an entire separate layer. And the number of times I've seen issues that it's like, oh, actually everything is falling over because there's a problem at the networking layer. And it doesn't immediately look like a problem at the networking layer. You have to kind of go through the process of finding it. That the number of times I have experienced that, I could write a whole additional book on.
Now that you finish this book, we can look at the next chance.
God, no more. Quote me on that. I'm not writing another one. And if you find me writing another one, take me outside and shake me.
Yep, it's next year. She'll be writing another one.
Yep. Are you the sole author of this new book, or?
No, thank God. If I ever do it alone, really take me outside and shake me. I convinced Andy Grabner to reprise his role as co-author. I couldn't convince Max. Max was like, no, one was enough. Thank you. And so I have another colleague of mine. His name is Robert Reitai, and he actually used to work at Red Hat, and then also worked at a very large financial services company, and now works at another smaller company. He and I were SREs together. He's also been a director of engineering, a software engineer, etc. So he brings a really cool. If you read the first book, we had this fictitious company idea, and we came up with that late into the writing process. And this time we baked it in from the beginning. So we take our theory and our tech examples and we apply it to a business lens in dedicated chapters for this fictitious company. That's a little spoiler for you. So we hope that storytelling helps folks understand how to use the information we're giving them.
It's kind of that's like how the Phoenix Project and those similar kind of books operate.
Yes. Yeah, it's no original ideas here, just pilfering really good ones.
Yeah, no, it's great to build off of those experiences for sure, and we could totally use that as the lead-in to a good idea like cloud events. Maybe we build a sophisticated or an opinionated, narrow set of cloud events, and we'll call that CDEvents, and that's why we're here today to talk, and that's perhaps the topic at hand. I guess the question, like, I should give a little more background, like why did I find CDEvents? So I'm not the maintainer of CDEvents. I've not come up with that. I'm not maintaining this, though I've started to get involved in that community, and it's been really interesting. I highly recommend everyone to go check out that community for sure. And they're looking for more involvement. It's great to have a specification, but we need people to implement it. And to bake it into your tools out there. I could talk about myself a little bit as far as like having worked in these various companies before, from like telecom companies, media, finance now, where I've always had this background doing software development in these different business areas, and have always worked on projects or in teams like these innovation or special projects team, where we're owning a little bit of like our whole stack itself. And so we're building a product, but we also need to build the platform to run our product. And so I've gotten, from a software developer, gotten closer and closer to day-to-day operations of software and like how you build platforms. And so certainly the modern trend of platform engineering and platform architecture, I have spent a lot of time thinking about that in its previous iterations. But certainly if you look in that space, platform engineering, particularly where software, how it gets built and developed and tested and inspected, things like that. I like to think people throw out the term like, oh, it's just CI/CD. There's like this preconceived notion, like so it's like, oh, I do application delivery. There's so much that goes to that space, and people kind of look at you crazy, like, what's application delivery? It's like, no. They're like, oh, it's CI/CD. And they dismiss like whatever tool they previously used, like they'll think Jenkins or something like that. It's like, oh, you just work on that. It's like, well, if you appreciate our whole domain, application delivery, there's so much that goes into building software, testing, validating, the delivery, the packaging, the shipping, all of the asset tracking, the security processes. There's a lot of machinery there, and how you bring that all together, how you build a seamless platform, kind of like we were talking just moments ago of networking. Like when the network works well, you don't notice it. If your application delivery, your CI/CD, things like that, if it's working well, you might not notice it. But if it's not working, you start having headaches around. It's like, oh, why does the Jenkins or the Artifactory not talk or connect to Argo well and to our Kubernetes cluster and things like that. And so to this discussion, I actually did a talk a couple of months ago at GitOps Con related to this. So certainly if you want to see that talk, we'll bring up some of the slides today as we go along to give you some examples. If you want to bring up the current slide as one example, this is one way to see the whole world. It's like, oh, if you look at the CNCF landscape, or there's also the Continuous Delivery Foundation landscape. Like these are all the tools that you might be composing your application delivery experience with, your CI/CD experience with. And so what kind of got me to this opportunity, or to this point of thinking about CDEvents, was more thinking about, I had an opportunity to essentially rip and replace a CI system at a company I worked at. And if you ever get that opportunity, and you go out to all of your developers and go find like, what do you want the next CI tool to do? You're just gonna get this massive list. It's like, I need it to integrate with everything imaginable. And we have two problems to solve, or one big kind of business problem we want to solve is, say, how do I measure everything from one end to the other, from git commit to deployment? How do I measure all of that? How do I want to tell the Dora story as an example? And for so many organizations, you probably have every one of these tools running that, like we're showing here in the slide, and you've written so much custom glued code, or you've tried to find the one perfect CI tool that has the most amount of integrations with things, or you're writing all this glue code to integrate or to figure out how to kind of shoehorn one tool to send a message to another tool, and to figure out that integration so you can work your way to kind of this messy, all right, I can tell the whole Dora story. I can get from commit to deployment, but there's a whole lot of custom glue code and things like that. And so in software, we think about software. I think if you look at the history of, for so many of us that have been working in it for a long time, you've lived this history of, I think there's like a spectrum of integration versus interoperability. And as we swing I think we see trends and things where we're swinging back and forth, maybe like a pendulum between heavy emphasis on integrations versus, oh, let's swing back to, let's worry about interoperability, and go back and forth.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting paradigm. Do I want one mega tool that does most of the things, or do I want several individual purpose-built tools that when brought together do all of the things? And right. I don't know that there's a one size fits all answer there. I always like using the right tool for the job, even if that means multiple tools. But then you have a problem of like, what does the interface look like, right? Which is like when we talk about an IDP, you can get a portal like Backstage, but technically speaking, you could put together all the same components without the unified portal and get a lot of the same impact. Not all of it, because of course they have like a software catalog and plugins and a bunch of other things that they provide. It's a different story, but right. It's and I came from the days of stringing together the tools through various things and then trying to figure out how to force it to emit a metric or something useful so that I didn't have to go 10 miles deep to figure out what went wrong. So that was always fun. But yeah, I agree. I think there's a pendulum, and I think we're just like actively like doing this right now. Everybody's trying to figure out what works correctly for them, what works correctly for their organization. What do we want to do? And the open source landscape has provided, there's so much here now compared to what there used to be. And I mean, we used to be doing this with like make files, and I used to jokingly call CI/CD just bash orchestration. I don't think you can simplify it. I don't think you can reduce it down to bash orchestration anymore. It does so much more than that now. It is so beyond that. But a lot of it was bash orchestration, back in the day.
Yeah, all my Jenkins pipelines were basically like the shell module, just
all of
a bunch of scripts. Yeah.
That was actually the only thing I know how to use Jenkins for.
Yeah, I actually said that earlier today. Like, I know what Jenkins does fundamentally, but I can only use like that shell feature within the Jenkins pipeline. That's the only thing I'm like relatively decent at.
Same. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And there's like taking the software history as an example of there's this swinging back and forth pendulum, but maybe it's like a spiral or something like that, where we're actually ratcheting up into higher layers and higher capabilities as we go back and forth, where we had like, long time ago, it was all mainframes, and let's get everything onto this kind of vertical integrated thing there. And then, then we could break it apart. We had the internet, we had TCP/IP, things like that. We could start interoperability. We can break that apart, and then back to bringing it all together again with your Oracle systems, your SAP, things like that. Break it back apart again. Microservices start coming around, and we get the REST interoperability, things like that. We've been bringing everything back together in our cloud platforms. We're all leaning into a specific integration, a specific API, whether it's AWS, Azure, GitHub Actions. But maybe today we can spread back out to this interoperability. So not only CDEvents is one example, OpenTelemetry could be another good example of being able to do more interoperability instead of trying to integrate all to one particular product. The developments in the WebAssembly space, WASI, that interoperability standard is becoming really interesting.
That space is super. We should do an episode on that, Johnny. We have not done an episode on that. Is a space. Every time I look at it, it's a little bit. It's almost a little bit brain breaking. If that makes sense, like I get it, but also it feels like magic still. I think that's the best way I can describe it. Like I get it.
What is that for? What are you talking about?
The like WASM WASI.
Oh, okay,
yeah. I did a talk on that like a year and a half ago or something. So we
Great. We'll bring you back in a few weeks.
Right.
Perfect.
Right. We'll do this
Thanks
again.
For volunteering.
My history of talks, I've always really enjoyed the opportunity to like, let's do GitOps, and what other domain issues do we have? Like GitOps with WebAssembly and GitOps with security. I've done that, or now I'm doing networking.
whole purpose of this stream is to
Yeah.
like practical implementations and utilizations of GitOps. Sorry, this is a very interesting comment. There's a repo named Potato Head that helps you test delivery tools to figure out the differences between them and what fits your needs. This is an amazing tip. I did not know that. I'm going to go look for it, and then I will put a link in the chat unless you beat me to it. Thank you for that. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Potato Head, not Potato Head. Potato Head. Don't ask a dyslexic person to read.
Potato Head, yes. Big question though, does Potato Head emit events and messages? Or are we integrating to that and that's just going to get me to another tool or something? Yeah. So continuing on, so like I had this opportunity to replace CI, rethink some of our CD, but also and looking at that problem space for my organization, like, oh, it's not, I don't just want to replace the CI tools. Like I want to tell the Dora story again. I want to be able to kind of easily track everything from one end to the other. So deliver, not just deliver tool functionality, but business value and things like that. And so it's kind of like trying not to find the one perfect product I could buy that integrated with everything, but realizing, oh, what if I took an interoperability approach? And that I kind of stumbled my way into discovering CDEvents. And so CDEvents itself is a specification. See if I might have get into the slides a little bit here. Yes, common specification. It defines the events that they define. These are opinionated cloud events, essentially. So opinionated on how you might define a continuous integration, delivery, operation, testing events, things like that. The specification itself, tool agnostic, in CDF as the parent, and again, just kind of the shared language.
Right. And I think this is really important because there's in the observability space, you have an issue of data normalization, right? You have different data coming from different places and it all looks different. How do you normalize it? So that is like, that's the problem that this like really solves. And it is a very annoying problem because just the mental overhead of deciding how to normalize it and then implementing the normalization, having a standard reduces that cognitive load.
Yeah, exactly. This hopefully is something then, across the open source community, we can all kind of iterate on and come up with these standards and work on that. This is an actual example of a message. As we're flipping through slides here, where it's talking about a context, a subject. There's also custom data where you're kind of talking about what happened, and usually custom data where you'll put in tool-specific data. What did, tell me about this Argo CD synchronization, or tell me about this Flux deployment, or this CI build, things like that. And since this is the GitOps guide, specifically what I think is most interesting out of all of the type of events, your integration, your continuous deployment, your continuous operations. So again, using Argo CD as an example, did I deploy an application, synchronize the application, continuously synchronize it? Has there been a out of sync issue? Has there been an Argo degradation? And it's interesting, I'm spitting out all these vocabulary that's Argo specific. The synchronization is Argo specific. The degradation of health, things like that. Those are Argo terms, not say like service deployed, service healthy, things like that. That might be CDEvents. This is kind of my dream vision of sorts for the next platform that I might build if it was fully CDEvents capable, being able to start off with this Dora event start and tell the whole Dora story all the way through. And all these events, these are all specific examples of real CDEvents of like, the developer creates something, makes a commit, you have branch created, branch initial commit, pipeline runs, your CI pipelines finished, you're stepping, I'm not specifying any specific tool here, any CI tool or build tool, deploy tools. it's nice that we can talk through this whole software experience without, saying, oh, this has to be Argo, or this has to be Jenkins or Tecton or things like that. If I can get Argo to emit a service deployed, here's a GitOps moment kind of thing. And then whether there's an incident, have Argo emit an incident, detect it, or have Argo emit service rollback or something else like that. You get the parts of GitOps coming, visible in CDEvents, where it's again kind of this standard structure that helps you kind of see what's going on with your whole platform, and it's not going to be dictated on what is your Argo CD architecture. That's always a great debate of, is it hub and spoke, is it many instances of Argo? Hopefully this kind of frees you into say, hey, yeah, I can deploy as many instances of Argo CD as I want, and they're all going to emit, ideally emit these events, and I can build common dashboards that tell me about the whole story of things instead of going to each Argo instance, looking at its UI, trying to track what's happening.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially because you can have something like Grafana that can connect to each data source without, and you can ship things as well, but like you also, because of data sovereignty and the requirements for regional boundaries, you might want to connect out to individuals as opposed to centralizing and depending on what's in there. Right.
Yeah. That's great discussion on like what's going to go into your message, where it's like, oh, can, operational data, metadata of your operations, can that all come back to home base?
So unfortunately, I have seen implementations where the namespace and or the pod name is PII. Oh. It'll be like so-and-so's something or such and such, tenant, blah, blah, it's overly descriptive and not abstracted in any way. So like, I have unfortunately seen it where it's like, oh, that is this person's name. I don't want that. We do have to know the name. We do have to know the pod name in order to know what's going on. But this is this person's name. I have, unfortunately, it's been a long time since I have seen it, but I have seen it in production systems. We do still see it in, obviously in dev systems and so forth all the time, because you need to know who owns the thing. And so because we're all too lazy to label and annotate, we just call it Hillary's pod or whatever we're doing. I'm not going to pretend like I'm not guilty of this. But sometimes that, and even employee PII, even if it is internal, it's employee only, you still have to take care of it exactly as if it was customer PII. So yeah, it gets dicey. It gets tricky.
Yeah, no, it's that can be a whole nother episode of.
It could be a whole other episode of why compliance is your worst nightmare if you don't center it from your design.
Yep. Yeah.
I could write a book.
Hey, we're figuring out the next 2 or 3 already. Let me jump through some of these. Finally, to my problem of solving was like wanting to change vendor tools, things like that, that there's a certain, in your existing application delivery, your existing CI/CD, usually, the swapping of tools usually is a monumental task that you just kind of don't do, and you just perpetuate, keeping some old system that shouldn't be running any longer, going. Hopefully this makes that switch a lot more approachable. That it's like, oh, your business data tracking of things doesn't really change, and it's maybe hopefully a little easier to swap out tools, things like that. What else is out there? Who is using CDEvents today? There are a variety of tools out there already that have done implementations of this. Jenkins has this, Tecton, Spinnaker, Harbor, Flux. I think Flux has a receiver. I don't think it's sending it. And I had put together an Argo CD proposal on how to have Argo put together a proposal on how Argo CD events map to CDEvents. So there are tools out there. There are ways to see that capability. Some of the companies I've seen, like these are all the big contributors to CDEvents right now, from Apple, IBM, etc. But
you skipped right over the Red Hat there. You were just like, it was too obvious.
Do you know who's the Red Hat committer?
I actually don't know who the Red Hat committer. I probably know them, but I actually don't know who the Red Hat committer is.
And I'm typically confused of like, this person is like, were they Red Hat? Did they go to IBM? Have they gone back and forth?
They go back and forth a lot. That does happen.
Yeah,
it does happen. People, the walls have holes.
Yeah. We can get into a little bit of examples. In this talk I was giving before was like, what are some possible situations? You have a tool sending CDEvents. You have a tool in your enterprise. You might have your tool admitting to a event manager bus system like that. That's eventually to some tool that's receiving CDEvents. Your tool might react to CDEvent messages. You might do both. So like to think through the whole life cycle of a deployment or something like that, or doing like a database upgrade where some event happens, or after a schema update has happened, Argo subscribes the event and launches this, triggers a synchronization in Argo right at that moment. That kicks off jobs that do testing, things like that, and emits events based off of what happened there. I am not going to show my actual demo environment now, but I do have there's in the link below here actually that you can see there if you want to try this out at home. Set up an environment where I've kind of cobbled together Argo's notifications controller to emit CDEvents, and also kind of sketch out like how Flux might also receive those events. So, not only doing something fun for the GitOps community where here's both popular GitOps tools working together in some Frankenstein way, for the sake of a good demo though. But this just kind of walked through the demo. And again, if you check out the code, if you want to see that at home, here's how I've imagined I would structure Argo event data going into CDEvents. You can go through this demo environment, see like the real, really deploying, really sending the message. It's really happening. And here's an example Grafana dashboard that receives the events and kind of visualizes what your enterprise might look like, how you kind of can use this. So the dashboards, the example demo I have here is with a tool called CDEviz. It's a great kind of hello world CDEvents tool to try out as well. It helps you kind of visualize what's happening. And, as an example here, a dashboard saying how a artifact progresses through environments, being able to look at, think about this being, your entire enterprise, every synchronization event, every incident. You don't have to know, or you're not looking specifically at a Argo dashboard or a Flux dashboard or Jenkins, things like that. It's like, here's all of your events kind of in this example dashboard pipeline. And yeah, with that, in the talk as well, so like how I've envisioned the mapping of Argo events into CDEvents. I have a pull request up. It's a document, not as much code. Would certainly love people out there in the world to take a look at that, see if the mapping I've come up with, if that makes sense. Certainly take a look there. And so that's one that I've done for Flux. They have a PR in their ecosystem. Someone else is kind of developing how Flux might emit CDEvents. Go check that out. Give that pull request some love and attention as well. I ton of data at you guys. So.
I'm just curious, like, what kind of overhead does it, like, from a resource, point of view? Is it pretty lightweight? Is it moderately heavy? Is like, what does it take to run CDEvents?
Again, you're not running CDEvents. It's whatever event or however you're handling messaging, eventing, telemetry in your existing tool. If you're in Flux or if you're in Argo, if you're in Jenkins, Tecton, Spinnaker. So there, it's going to be, I hope it's, one quick process thread, like really quick saying, I've got this data, shove it into a message and emit that message. So whatever the overhead is to emit that message, and certainly how you want to do that communication, if it is if you need to if you have a driver or something like that that's connecting to a Kafka or some other message system, or if you're making just a REST HTTP post to an endpoint or things like that. So whatever it takes to just do that message transaction.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I think at the worst, if you're working with something that doesn't emit to the specification, and you don't have the ability to use a plugin or build and use a plugin, you may be talking about just adding a layer of middleware as a simple service that just does the data translation into the specification. It shouldn't be, I mean, I can't sit here and napkin math exactly for you how much that would be in terms of everything else, but like it wouldn't be that wouldn't be the worst little service to have to run. Somebody smarter than me can probably napkin math the exact resource utilization that would have to be for, like, something else, but we'd have to actually design it to even begin that napkin math. And this is not that call. This is not, we are not doing, I sat the Google interview once. I had to do that. Oh man, that is hard. That is difficult. They set you up to be able to actually approach the math though, by giving you like basic starting pieces, but God, I hate math. And of course, here's the obligatory, well, Johnny, just run an AI agent and have it do it for you.
Those don't do math either.
They do, but also they don't. This is really fun because they do math, right? They do math because they are trying to determine the most statistically likely thing to come next, right? And so like the fun one of like, you ask the model like how many R's are in the word strawberry and they get stuck. And you can make that prompt better, but one of the reasons why it can get stuck is if I grammatically ask it, if perfect grammatically correct English, ask it how many R's, and I use capital R for the letter, which you would do in English, are in the word strawberry. Some of the models have trouble understanding that capital R and lowercase r are the same, because mathematically in like computer language, they're different.
Right.
So that gets fun for it, and that allows for very silly things to happen. But yeah, that was my obligatory AI plug for the day.
Speaking of, was it interoperability versus integration? Why something, an explosion of interoperability would be like MCP. Whereas like at first, over a year ago, when we're all trying to come up, you saw a proliferation of integration products, and then like MCP is like, oh, we need to shift that way.
Also, skills now, like Claude and some others have a concept of skills marketplaces, which are not quite MCP servers. But they are an augmentation of the model. That's real fun. But yeah, I mean, you can use AI to normalize your data for you. The degree of success you will have with that is, it'll be interesting to see if anybody has ever done it. I'd be interested to see how the results were. But yeah, I think realistically what you're looking at, if you don't have have we all heard about the government? I did hear about that from, was it Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel? I was watching one of those and they talked about that. The U.S. government is interested in the Claude for military use. That's we're not going to talk about that. We don't have opinions on that in this stream.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way. I did hear about it.
Skynet's
It does.
coming.
Skynet is coming. That's really what it feels like. I made that joke to somebody recently and they didn't get it, and I explained it and they said, wow, you're kind of a nerd, aren't you? I was like, well, yes, but also you're older than me, so I would have thought you didn't miss those like movies. It's fine. Everything's fine. Right. But yeah, we don't have opinions on the US government on this show. That's not what we're here about. But yeah, I did hear it. What was I saying? Right. I think you can do this with a very simple. You can use an API gateway to do this normalization on the heavier side, but also just like a just like a little service, that little middleware service.
If you're doing like those middlewares or the API gateways, like they can do the work. You want I would hope you'd want to do that in conjunction with, say, like, oh, I'm going to map to CDEvents. Rather than continuously reinventing my own mapping or something like that.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly. I mean, like, yeah, you could just tell, like, it's that I need to normalize my data. I have my data coming from lots of sources. What does that normalization look like? Having a specification and then having even a subset of your tool set already adhering to that specification really helps, because then you can just tie it all together with the end. And yeah, you may have to do some mapping for the things that don't. It's fine. Like I said, API gateway is kind of the lazy, easy, like hand wave thing to say, but it doesn't even need to be that heavyweight. You could probably do it with a pretty small little microservice that runs on a cron job or something. Depends on how high of a data fidelity you need. You need it at every single event, like driven event, or can you store your events and then once a day normalize them and then use it for your dashboarding or whatever there.
Yeah. The CDEviz tool that I was kind of demoing dashboards, it also will do that kind of mapping for you. It can work as a broker for you to do those things. We'll certainly give that tool a look. I guess it's like interesting where, you know, if more and more tools say could adopt CDEvents, you're removing the part where they all need to integrate to something to get the message out, kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that also is nicer because, well, not necessarily nicer. It can be very nice, especially in highly regulated environments where one tool may meet your standards and needs, but that common integration that a lot of places rely on does not. So like that, you know, kind of like having to take bits and pieces and put them together for your own environment thing. I think it's great. I love the idea of a specification. And especially because a lot of architecture, we talked about kind of like that swinging back and forth of the pendulum of like how we're doing things. I think that nature of being event driven, I don't think we are moving away from that. If anything, I think we're trying to get higher fidelity rates and higher reduce the gap between thing 1 and thing 3 by like having more events in there. And honestly, a metric emission like an event is computationally it's insignificant. It's not a ton of data, and you don't need to retain them for a very long time either. So you don't necessarily need a lot of storage, right? How often do you go back and look at an event from 6 weeks ago? Probably never. Right? You may want to keep some trending or some other thing you do your data sampling or whatever, but a lot of that stuff can roll off really quickly. So it's not very computationally heavy to transport. It's not very computationally heavy to store. It's a very, very lightweight thing, an event. And then you can use, like you said, various message queues or message buses or something like that. Like Kafka, you mentioned. In IoT, we used MQTT a lot, especially if we didn't care about like ordering.
Yeah. Within these, within like CDEvents, you're going to have when, where, and why something happens. So you can kind of aggregate that together however you need to, and looking those things. And for sure, like you get to choose through any of your other tools, like how much you need to persist something and choose that life cycle of kind of tracking why did things happen, why did it happen, when did this deployment happen, something like that.
And I think the why is really good because the why builds a trace.
Yep.
Right. It builds a trace without having like a trace in the traditional sense that you might be thinking of a trace.
Right. Yeah. It's not a telemetry tracing. This is a kind of business tracing.
Yes. That's exactly what I was trying to get at without properly representing it. But we're there. We're on the same page.
We're in sync. We know exactly what we're going
what we're on about.
Yes.
If anybody else knows what we're on about, that's a whole different problem. But sometimes I think we're here for our own enjoyment. That's all right.
Yeah. But yeah, for the sake of again being in the GitOps podcast here of I see in the GitOps case like I've had the issue of like choosing which depending on what my user experience is, and be like I might choose a certain Argo architecture or Flux architecture or things like that or other concerns. And so if I can I hopefully this would be a process to kind of free you up in a little bit more of your architectural experiences, choices and things like that. So like you could have all amounts of Argos running and collapse and gather that information together.
I think it depends on your scale too, right? Because I could see you may have to have like multiple hub and spoke or a hub and spoke, but some distributed, because it depends on what are you doing? Where are you doing it? What are the regulations around all of those things? So when you look at like really large enterprises that I can't name by name, but you might be able to guess, and they have a massive amount of clusters, they don't necessarily have just one model for this. They may have to have a mixture of these models because of customer requirements, security and compliance regulations, local laws of the data where the data center is, that the clusters are living, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which is, of course, partly a customer requirement as well, because customers expect you to comply with the laws where they run their stuff. I don't know if, in case you didn't know, they do. They do. So you may not be able to commit to just one. That would be nice, but it actually may not be possible. And Johnny has worked with this even more than I have, so he can check me if he thinks I'm crazy towns, but I don't think I am. So not having to try to figure out, all right, we've got all of these things, we have to have air gapped, but some of them don't have to be air gapped, etc. A unification of the way the data emitted looks helps to really solve for that potential flexibility you might need so that you can do things in a way that makes sense for your fleet, especially if your fleet is a mixture of medium regulated and highly regulated.
Yeah.
Not that I have any direct experience with that.
Not even regulation. I've experienced, I think we all live these experiences in just any large enough enterprise where, given the right, whatever the size is, it's some tipping point that you don't have one CI system, you don't have one CD system, you don't have one Artifactory or something like that. Your one company will have multiple CIs and other tools and things like that, kind of going back to our first slide of sorts. And so you have these, whether it's a regulation or if it's like a organization based off of Conway's law, those challenges, where it's like, these specifications allow us to hopefully perhaps communicate and have a better idea of our whole enterprise and what's going on.
Yeah, without sacrificing either the autonomy that you want, because that level of autonomy to design your own CI/CD systems that work for your little business pillar helps to actually let that team who's doing it like accelerate. There's nothing worse for, we actually talked about this in the platform engineering book. Max, I think, specifically covered it. There's really not anything worse for developer productivity than trying to force them into tools that they like almost work against them as they're trying to use it. right? It's not natural for their data, for their like the way they've been doing things. It doesn't provide the right value. It's not really meeting their needs, so they're having to hack around it or work around it. There's not really anything worse you could do to your dev team to make them less effective than that. So giving that autonomy still allows for them to spend their time in a, like, you still probably want an IDP within a pillar, right? If you have like a bunch of teams working on the same product, you probably want an IDP there. But if you have multiple product streams, you don't necessarily want IDP for all those product streams. That may not actually make sense. May make sense, may not make sense. This is an individualized situation. But at the end of the day is you do need that, not maybe the product manager for this product or the product manager for this project, but like the, executive they report to needs some way of understanding things. You have to be able to understand. At the end of the day, a lot of it's amazing how much telemetry data is so relevant to making good business. Like good business decisions should be data driven. So you have to surface that so that you can get good business decisions. At the end of the day, it's all a business decision.
Like, what kind of AI agents should you adopt in your development flows and things like that? It's like, can you really measure your developer productivity and what's changing with the introduction of different tools and things like that? If you don't know that, or you're just kind of making it up as you go.
And is a number that is high or bad? It may not be, right? So we talked about pipeline earlier and like pipeline start and stop. If the length of time a pipeline takes to run doubles, that might be bad. But we may have also made our pipeline actually do things that are important earlier in our development processes, making the run take longer, but we got that time back on the other end. So, right, you need to know the metrics, but you also have to have some way of coloring the metrics. So you have to turn that data into information at some point. But it's, again, so much easier to turn data into information when you have like one way your data looks. You know how to expect the data to look. That's a lot easier to figure out.
Yeah, and there's kind of taking this idea a little bit more. Some of the other discussions I've had in other organizations over the last year where they've had when they're, say, adopting AI tools in their development flows and such, where it's and what I see as another good use case in CDEvents, where classically we might have had, like, I might make one pull request and I might have one CI pipeline kick off, and I have that one pipeline and I watch it and I see it happen. Or for any large enough organization where it's like, oh, we're going to start kicking off a few more CI pipelines, and it's you're not you don't need to babysit one pipeline as much. Or like in some AI flows where people I've seen, like, oh, I've asked my AI agent, like, develop 4 possible solutions to this problem, make 4 pull requests. Let's see what pops out the other side of the CI out of those 4, which one, passes all the tests or something like that. And so if people are constantly iterating on opening many, many creations of pipelines, collapsing them, opening more, as you have just all these pipelines kicking off all the time, being able to gather, again, what is happening, from like Adora metrics and other specific metrics, being able to track the whole story here and what's changing. I think that's part of, I think, some of the use cases and needs for like a CDEvents capability in all of our tools.
Yeah, agreed. It'll be very interesting to see. And then we also, like I said, I think I mentioned this, maybe I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, or maybe I mentioned it when we were talking pre-show, right? The introduction of AI, like the computational models are not like changing super much in terms of like what are best practices, what are the patterns for implementation, what works, what doesn't work. But there are a couple new metrics that are being added, one of which is like accuracy, right? You need to be able to evaluate the accuracy of your AI agent and what it's doing. I did a ton of research into this topic, and there are different scores and so forth. You can actually like score your model, but a bad score doesn't necessarily mean a bad response. So if I tell my AI agent, hey, optimize all of your responses for, to use the least amount of tokens, right? Depending on what scoring model you use, it then may give you a good answer that achieves what you need perfectly, but get a really low score in terms of accuracy. And the kind of the idea is like if the score is 1, it's a good score, and then like most of the scores are going to be like around 0.5 to 0.8 depending on the models. And so if the one thing that is like accuracy, you can calculate it mathematically through various scoring options, and there's a few, but it's also still subjective. And so that'll be kind of the interesting types of things where when we can start not that is where I see a potential interesting opportunity for something like CDEvents, where you can track different tuning of like, if I prompt it this way to do this, and I prompt it this, change your prompt parameters, and then spin out a few agents all using the same model to come back with answers, and then get back their answers and their accuracy ratings, and then decide what is the correct model. That kind of like sprawl, and then back to like, okay, now I have normalized data that I can see and I can track like how it is. That would be a really cool implementation of CDEvents. In that would like kind of slide nicely into all this exact workflow. Not that I've been thinking very deeply about this topic lately at all.
Yes, there's a lot of opportunities for this kind of interoperability, I think, discussion, and continuing to refine what we're measuring, what we're building, things like that.
Agreed. And there's so many opportunities, we don't even have the time to talk about them all because we are at the top of the hour.
I'll leave you with some links here at the end. See if I can find them.
I love your mechanical keyboard. Click, click,
yes.
click, click, click.
I
used to not have one, and then I turned 30 and I got one, and I was like, oh, that's what happens when you turn 30. You become a mechanical keyboard person.
And is yours in like 2 halves?
I do have one of those. I actually specifically got it. I haven't been using it right now because it has a different layout. I got a Keyboardio specifically because after my shoulder surgery, I couldn't bring my arm in for typing. I needed to keep it like this, and I actually had to keep it in a sling while typing, even after I was out of the sling the rest of the time, because just like the weight of your arm just hanging can stretch out all of the things that they had just had to fix. So yes, I do have one, and it's different and it's interesting, but it's also RGB, and it has like a nice wood grain. It's very pretty. It was a $300 investment, and I love it. And it's actually set up to, this is my work rig setup, and then if I turn this way, I have a personal rig, and it's on my personal rig setup. So that's where I use it today. And it has replaceable keycaps, and it's totally programmable, and you can give it short keys and all this other stuff. It was really a fun investment. I had a lot of fun. I spent more time setting it up than actually using it, because I almost never now try not to be on my computer too much when I'm not, making myself crazy. But yeah, no, super cool. Really, really fun. Highly recommend. 10 of 10. Get the split mechanical keyboard with the little angle up. So ergonomical. Very good for you. All of these things you must do after you turn 30. That's the moral of the story.
And after you turn 30, adopt CDEvents and put it into your tools. And
I would hope that you can do that one even before you turn 30. But yes, at about 30, you should have. All right, Luke, thank you so much for coming on. I was not joking about having you come back. We will definitely discuss that. We are streaming next week. We will be talking about Holmes GPT. We've covered this on the stream before, but it's come a long way since then. So we're going to get to hear about the latest and greatest there. Same time?
Yes.
Check the public calendar. I forgot. I think we actually moved it up half an hour earlier, but I don't remember for sure. Or half an hour later. Check the public calendar. I do have the calendar up to date. But overall, same time, same place. Johnny won't be here, so I'll have to figure out how to do the introduction stuff all by myself again. And we'll see how that goes.
It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be great. Until then, as always, choose your technical debt wisely, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all. See you all at KubeCon.
See ya.
Yep, bye.